Is it?
Did it go? Action.
Okay, so on Dav Vav Amid Beis, there we begin a whole sugya of Rav Shimon versus the Chachamim. It starts in our Mishnah, and then we break it down further over here. And the machlokes, the argument that they're having with one another is that the Chachamim hold that there's 3 walls for the sukkah, and Rav Shimon holds that there are 4 walls to the sukkah. So, the first reason that they bring down, where they're first arguing, is that the Gemara comes and says that the Chachamim hold Yesh Aim L'Mesayra, and Rav Shimon holds Yesh Aim L'Mikra. What does this mean? Then in the pasuk where we derive out the Pesukim, where we derive out the mitzvah of sukkah, it says the word sukkos 3 times, but the first 2 times is missing a vav. So when it's missing a vav, this is considered to be the Masorah, how it's written, right? And so because it's missing a vav, so he counts fewer words. We'll leave it at that, and he ends up, and the Chachamim say that there's only 3 walls that are required, and according to Rav Shimon, where you read it bisukais with a vav, you would pronounce the vowel at the end. He counts each one of them, so sukkos is plural, and then he takes out one of them to teach you the mitzvah sukkah itself. So you have sukkos 3 times, each one's twice, it's 6. You take out the first one to teach you the mitzvah, it leaves you 4 behind, and therefore that is the first argument where this originates. So Tosfos over there, right, goes into a whole long argument with himself where he doesn't understand. He says, how could it be that in some places we would hold Yesh Aim, in Rabbi Akiva's case, in Rabbi Shimon's case, we would hold Yesh Aim L'Mikra, and sometimes they hold both Yesh Aim L'Mikra, meaning that we go according to how we read it, and they also go according to how it is written. And so the Tosfos comes and brings all these examples down, and he says, you see here, it doesn't make sense. Sometimes Rabbi Akiva will say, right, like in Sanhedrin, he says, oh, Rabbi Akiva only says Yesh Aim L'Mikra, so he seems to hold like Rabbi Shimon that we can use Yesh Aim L'Mikra. And then sometimes, like in Pesachim, in Dav Lamed Vov, he says Rabbi Akiva holds both Yesh Aim L'Mikra and Yesh Aim L'Masorah. He uses them for both. And then the other place where this is brought down is the Gemara in Sukkah and Daf Lamed Beis Amid Beis, where they seem to hold by both opinions, Yesh Aim L'Mikra and Yesh Aim L'Masorah. So Tosfos is very bothered. He says, what are we doing here? What's going to be? So in the Tosfos on Pesachim Daf Lamed Vov Amid Beis actually says something very interesting. So and that's one of the cases where they hold by both where it's written and how it's read. So the Tosfos over there says that Re'afak of the Chsiv Tanai the Shimon the Masorah, right? The Masorah is so even though we're over there that we have Rav Shimon says Masorah, the Velav Mikra L'Deu Nafke b'Masorah, that we also have to learn out the Masorah. We learn out Meiser Sheni, right? The Loi Darshinin Ani Mikol Malkum the Afagav the Svirle the Loi Darshim Mikra L'Shum Drosha, that even though we're going to use the Masorah to teach the real halacha over on Pesachim, right? The Gemara in Pesachim clearly uses the Mikra as well. So he says, right, that we can't just ignore the Mikra, meaning, right, that both of them are relevant to us. So the Gemara, the Torah wouldn't write something and have us pronounce it differently, not to use, and have to just say one of them is completely superfluous, right? So in the Gemara in Sukkah and Daf Lamed Beis Amid Beis, right, the use of this technique becomes particularly clear, because the Gemara over there, what we're doing is that we're teaching out the halachas of a lulav. So by lulav it says kafos temurim, which would be right, but kafos temurim on lav beis lamed beis amid beis, kafos temurim, kafos is written chaser vav. It's without the vav in there. Okay, so he says over there. So the first thing that the Gemara comes says, so he says kafos temurim. So lemikra kafos temurim, it's plural. So what does he say? So the Gemara brings down over there that what are you supposed to do? That it's for when the lulav separates. So everyone, when they take their lulav on sukkahs, everyone does it. There's knots over there. So kafos temurim, when it separates, you should knot them up. That's the first one. But then kafos temurim chaser vav, he comes and he says that you only take one lulav. No one here ever uses two lulavim. So over there, they use both, right? So, but you use the Mesorah of how it's written to teach you that it uses one, and that you only use one lulav, and you use the mikra to teach you use knots for when it's separating out. So the question is, why over there is it a case where we use mikra and Mesorah, and over here, apparently, in each one of these cases, they would only use either mikra or Mesorah. And I think that the answer comes in the fact that in the Gemara and Sukkah, right, these aren't mutually exclusive ideas. So like the Taisvos in Pesachim says that you can't ignore that even though the Iker is the Mesorah, you can't ignore the Mikra either. You can't ignore how it's read, right? But the problem that comes over here is that these are mutually exclusive. The Mesorah over here in the Gemara on Lamed Vov, the Mesorah over here comes to teach us that we should only use 3 walls, and the Mikra comes to teach us we should use 4 walls. Well, unlike the Gemara later on in Sukkah where we learn out different halachas regarding the knots, and where we learn out halachas regarding the lulav, right? Those are mutually exclusive. But here I can't have a sukkah with both 3 walls and 4 walls. Either it has 3 walls or it has 4 walls. You can't go with both of them, right? And the Gemara to further enhance is the Tosfos over there on Lamed Beis in Sukkah says that the Mesorah is the Iker. And when you look up the halacha, the truth is that the halacha over by lulav is that you only use one. So if I have 2 lulavim in my arba minim, it's puzzle, it's not good, right? But the halacha is brought down that the idea of using knots is only mechuber. So therefore we use this extra drasha to teach us the knots, but it only teaches us something worth mechuber, right? So it comes to only teach us something else, right? But in each of those 2 cases, Tosfos over there says the Mesorah is the Iker, right? So I wanted to take that word, I wanted to apply it to Purim, right? So we have Purim that's coming upon us in the coming days, right after Shabbos Purim we have upon us, and it's a very widely brought down concept that during the times of Purim we were Mekabel Torah Sheba'al Peh, that we came and we were Mekabel Torah Sheba'al Peh, and we reaccepted upon ourselves the Torah. So I quickly I used Google and I quickly Googled this. It is a very widely spread out concept. So I wanted to find someone, instead of just saying I know it to be true, I wanted to find someone who would help me out to figure out all of the different places where it was. So I found an essay from a Rav Hershel Schachter. I'm sure he's a brilliant man. I don't know who he is.
I know who he is.
Oh, okay, so
the Hershel Schachter is in the YU.
Okay, so I know who he is. Never mind. Right.
Yeah.
Right, okay, so I know who he is. Never mind. So I didn't go to check out who he was. Right. So anyways, so he wrote a very short essay on this, and he brings down that the Gemara in Shabbos says, right, that the Jews were forced, the very famous Gemara, that the Jews were forced at Har Sinai to accept the Torah, right, kafel char chagigis, right, the very famous Gemara, that this was forced upon them. And then he also brings a Gemara in Pesachim to teach that at the times of Purim, how do we know that we make a Suda? There's no other, right, for Chanukah or any other Yontiv that the Rabbanim were Masakin. We never have a Suda. So why were the Rabbanim Masakin when they created the holiday of Purim, that we should have a Suda. So the Gemara in Pesachim says why? Because we make a hekish from Purim to Shavuos because we were makabel the Torah all over again. So just as we were makabel the Torah on Shavuos and we make a Suda to celebrate that, same here on Purim we should make a Suda to celebrate that. And the last Gemara that he brings down is the Gemara in Bava Metzia that says that the only time in the history of the world that we ever were Makabel Halach directly from Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the only time that we ever will do it, right, and it'll never come up again, was at Har Sinai. That every other time, that any other halach that we had to Makabel would have been from the Rabbanim. So, right, so in relation to Purim, in relation to how we're going to paskin halacha according to the Masorah, how we're going to, right, Yeshem l'Masorah, Yeshem l'Mikra, right? To us, it's very simple, right? We open up a Mishnah Berurah, and we say, oh, mitzvah derabanan. But imagine back in the day, I'm living during the times of the first base of Mikdash, I'm living during the times of the Mishkan, right? And I have a halacha derabanan, and I say to myself, that's got to be crazy, right? I was at Har Sinai, my grandfather is at Har Sinai. So who are these Rabbanim to come and to say, right, that I am supposed to follow what they're saying? HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't tell me this at Har Sinai, and who are you to come adding or changing or enhancing or modifying what was brought down at Har Sinai? So in light of that word today, we say, oh, it's a mitzvah derabanan, and it's naig on the whole community. Right, and it's very easy for us to comprehend that. Back then, it was very difficult for them to comprehend that, conceivably, right? So therefore, as they're going through in Churban Beis Hamikdash Rishon, and they go to Galus, right? It seemingly happens to be that the Jewish people finally come to grips with this. How do they come to grips with this? And what is the message behind Purim? That Mordechai and Esther, right, led the whole thing. They led the people. They decided what to do. Right, nowhere in the Megillah does a Kadosh Baruch Hu's name ever come up. Everything is hidden, and therefore it lays forward not only how are we going to proceed going forward, where Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to be hidden from us, and Nevuah is going to then be taken away from us, right? But it also teaches us then to accept the Rabbanim. So the idea where we would have a machlokes Yeshem l'Mikra, Yeshem l'Masorah, and sometimes we would see people like Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shimon, they would paskin Yeshem l'Mikra, right? We no longer paskin like that. We paskin Yeshem l'Masorah, right? Because this is how we are forced to live our lives today. So I think that right, and back to Tosfos' kasha, why sometimes do we say Yeshem l'Masorah or sometimes Yeshem l'Mikra, and sometimes we say both? The answer is, I think, that where it's mutually exclusive, we can't do both. But as Tosfos says in other places, you can't ignore them. You can't ignore either one of them, right? But over here, but in places like in the Gemara in Pesachim on Lamed Vav Lamed Beis, or in the Gemara later on in Sukkot Lamed Beis, where they're not mutually exclusive ideas, we use both. But the halacha seems to accord according to the Masorah. Thank you very much.
Shkoyach.